but I knew at that time they think I'm having a stroke. I was 47 years old. There's no way I'm having a stroke. Old people have strokes.
Jim, how did you find Carnivore?
Dave, I'm guessing my story's not that dissimilar than most people's. I grew up in the 70s. We didn't have the internet back then, obviously. We just relied on what the government told us. My mother did the best she could do. And that's really how I learned my food eating habits back then. If I was hungry, she'd say, eat a piece of bread and some cheese. And so I'd eat processed cheese and bread. And I thought whole wheat food was healthy, low fat was healthy. Fortunately, as a kid, I was so active. I was on my bike all the time. Um, really stayed fairly fit and trim until I got a car. Then I was on the bike less. But even then, through high school, I was relatively not overweight, at least. I was probably a little pudgy. Um, then, as I got into the work world and started drinking and having fun, I put on a little weight, but I managed to keep it under control. It really wasn't until my wife got pregnant. I was married. She was a great cook. We had twins. She put on 30 pounds with twins. I think I matched her pound for pound. After the twins, she lost it and I kept it. And then I kind of just struggled. And I knew I was doing something wrong. I knew that I was not healthy. I went on a physician assisted weight loss journey and I lost some weight, and that was great. But I put it back on. And, by now we're talking early 2000s. So the internet was out, there was tons of information. And so I was always searching, what is the answer? What's right? I found the China study. I'm kind of an all in guy. And if you read the book, it makes sense. It all sounds logical. I went full vegan, probably was full vegan for almost 2 years, and I lost weight. I mean, I did get healthier. And I think that's not uncommon, just because part of going vegan was the removal of the processed foods. But after a couple years, I was so lethargic. I was weak. I was miserable, and the food was terrible. I was willing to do it for the health benefits, but the food was terrible. And so I finally added back in protein. But because we were so scared of fat, saturated fat is the enemy, I was unwilling to eat much fat. So I went very low fat protein, lean chicken breasts, and I eventually put weight back on. I wasn't a perfect vegan. I wasn't even perfect when it came to being high vegetable and low fat. I would occasionally have the chicken sandwich from Wendy's with the fries. But for the most part, I was low fat and I ate pretty darn good diet. So it was January of 2016. Pretty normal day. Actually had a house project going on. I worked all day on the house, had a couple glasses of wine. Don't remember if I ate dinner, but if you saw a before picture, you'd probably recognize that I wasn't into fasting at that time of my life. Went to bed, woke up about midnight, and I was uncomfortable. Can't really explain it. Didn't feel like anything was wrong, and I was trying to turn on my side, and I couldn't turn on my side, and I was like flopping. And I thought, gosh, this is crazy. I'm going to wake my wife up. I decided to get out of bed and take my shirt off to try to get comfortable. As soon as I stood up, I hit the floor. I was paralyzed on my left side. Couldn't move my leg. Didn't have a lot of use of my left arm. My wife fortunately woke up, being a guy, Lord only knows how long I might have laid there waiting to try to figure this out. But she woke up. She said, I'm calling 911. She later said, I knew something was wrong when you didn't object to me calling 911. So she called 911. She's talking to him on the phone, and they're asking questions, and they tell me to raise my arm. So I raise my arms. My right arm comes up normal. My left arm, all I could do is just get it up. It was just shaking, and I couldn't raise it. And they keep asking questions. She's talking to them. They tell me to smile. Well, my smile was normal, but I knew at that time they think I'm having a stroke. I was 47 years old. There's no way I'm having a stroke. Old people have strokes. Long story short, that we could spend an hour talking about the just what it took to get to the hospital, because I live on the second story. It's a two-story house. I'm on the second floor. The paramedics got there, checked me out. They get me onto a stretcher, made it about 10 feet before the female said, he's too heavy. There's no way we can make it down the stairs. And I got to tell you, laying there waiting for them to come, I thought that was a low point. When they had to get on the radio and basically call out for help because they had a guy too fat to carry down the stairs, that was a new low point. While we're waiting for the help, they brought up what's called the stair chair. I'm sure everyone is familiar with a two-wheel dolly. Well, an appliance dolly is a two-wheel dolly with some belts on it. It's made to go downstairs for carrying oversized objects. A stair chair is essentially an appliance dolly with a seat. So they strap me into the stair chair, one guy in every corner of that chair, and we go down the stairs, thunk, thunk, one step at a time. And the worst thing was the wall that was separating me from the next to me on the stairs, it was the same wall I was on the other side of. I hadn't even moved 5 feet as the crow flies, and I'm literally at a new low point. But long story short, we get to the hospital. They checked me out. You know, you used to hear, you don't see those ads anymore, but they used to talk about the stroke team, and you get to the hospital and they're waiting. And it's true, they were waiting for me. There was like a doctor meeting me at the ambulance because they want to get you in. And what they really want to do is get you a drug called TPA, which can dissolve the clot if it's what's called an ischemic stroke. There's two strokes, ischemic and a hemorrhagic. The hemorrhagic is a bleed. And that's why they can't give that to you in the ambulance, for example, because if it's hemorrhagic, it's not going to do anything and it may make it worse. So the first thing I have to do is get you a CT scan. Well, you do go to the front of the line, so there's no waiting. They get me into the CT scan. And there's really not a firm diagnosis for a stroke. It's really just kind of elimination of everything else. Symptoms look like a stroke. It's obviously not something else, therefore it's a stroke. So they determined it was a stroke. Spent about 3 days in the hospital, and then had to go to a rehab hospital for about 3 weeks to learn how to walk again. And it took me, I'd say my overall rehab, it was really probably a year before I was back to 100%. But as I said earlier, I'm all in. And one of the things I did when I was still in the rehab hospital is I hired a personal trainer. And so I had a personal trainer at my house the week after I returned home. And I've had a personal trainer it's over 9 years now, consistently 3 times a week. And I kind of also then dove into, what do I need to do diet-wise? What do I need to change? Because 3 weeks in a rehab hospital, you get 3 hours of therapy a day. My staff came by from work, and so I did some work. My family came by, but you have a lot of time. You have a lot of time to think and reflect. And, one of the things in the hospital that's interesting is they always ask you, what are your goals? It's like, what do you mean? What are my goals? My goal is to get out of here. And they kind of help you set your goal. And that my goal was to be almost as good as I was before I came in. And that sounded pretty good till I had time to think about it in the rehab hospital. And prior to the stroke, I was overweight, semi-sedentary, high blood pressure that was not as controlled as tightly as it could be, on the verge of a stroke. And I want to get almost that good. Not a very good goal. So I actually set myself a goal 150%. Now, what does that really mean at the end of the day? I certainly didn't want to weigh 150% of what I weighed, but I wanted to be better. I mean, that was just kind of a generic, hey, I want to be much better than I am. And I've stuck by that goal. I actually got on a couple of, because I did have time, I was on a couple of forums, and there were a couple of stroke forums, and I'd posted that as my goal. And it was shocking that the responses, I had 2 responses, and both of them were along the lines of, you can't recover from a stroke like that. You shouldn't set your expectations that high. I closed those websites down and never went back. I tend to have a pretty positive attitude, and I was determined to come out of this at 150%. And like I said, it's fairly subjective, but I feel like I have. So as I went on, one of the things I actually started doing in the hospital, in the rehab hospital, I was kind of eating fairly keto, partially because they didn't have a wide menu. You could order what you wanted. And I was eating quesadillas. So I did have some carbs in the tortilla, but for the most part, it was meat and cheese. And I started losing weight. So I thought, okay, I'm onto something. And so probably over the next year or two, I went more keto. And then I kind of moved to the ketovore. And the more I researched and the more I learned about the Ken Berries of the world and Sean Baker's, Anthony Chafee, and saw these guys who seemed to be thriving on meat only. And I'll be honest, it took a while to fully get over the whole saturated fat, right? I mean, it was so ingrained. I think you're close to my age, Dave, and like my entire life, saturated fat, we was just beat into us. And it really took me a long time to finally say, okay, I'm going to eat saturated fat and I'm not going to worry about it. But part of what helped me, a few things helped me actually get to that point was number one, I'd been at the extreme. I'd been vegan. I did not have good results. I was vegan, low fat, and I had a stroke. I mean, by some standards, I was doing a lot of things, if not almost everything right. I mean, I even did some exercise back then. So it was pretty easy for me to say, what they've preached hasn't worked. So I am willing to try something different. So slowly, I kind of just moved over to eating more and more meat only products. And I got to tell you, it's so much easier. Like it's the only way to live. I'm a fan of Jason Fung. Um, I got into fasting. I love to fast. Well, that's not actually true. I don't always enjoy fasting. It feels pretty good after you do a multi-day fast to have accomplished it, and you realize you feel fine. You're not going to die, but it's not always fun. But I do think there's benefits. So I try to work in a 5-day fast, maybe a couple times a year. I try to do a 48-hour fast every week, which probably works out to be every other week that I accomplish that. I generally eat one meal a day. One of the things people talk about carnivore being boring. Well, I don't find it the least bit boring. Um, I find it amazingly simple and extremely time saving. And I find it fairly inexpensive. So I'm going to eat one meal a day. That might be a pound, pound and a half of meat. Well, I buy a half a cow, so a ground hamburger cost me maybe $4 a pound, so a pound and a half. I'm at six. Call it, say I'm a little off, $8. I mean that's my meal for the day. Most people spend more than that on breakfast and then eat lunch and dinner. Um, my preference is ribeyes, and because we have a half a cow, we go to the store every Sunday and frequently am able to buy meat on sale. I prefer to eat my steaks, but you don't get that many steaks from a cow. So I'm always getting a steak on sale. I'm paying $8 a pound. So I'm eating a pound, pound and a half. So it's an $8 to $12. So if that's all I eat for the day, it's way cheaper than what most people are spending on food in any given day. Yeah. So anyway, I feel like it's the simplicity is nice because I save so much time eating one meal a day. And the other thing is I've got a grill called an Auto Wild grill. So it's this 1500-degree searing grill, and I like my steaks rare. So I can literally start that grill as I walk in the house, let it heat up for 2 minutes as I prepare a steak. I walk out with a plate. I put that steak on the grill, minute and a half per side. So 5 minutes later, I'm eating. I'm eating off the same plate I cooked on. For the entire day, my dishes consist of a knife, a fork, and a plate. I mean, if I live by myself, I can do the dishes once every 2 weeks.
It's that I think that is one of the nicest things about carnivore. It's just so simple, and there's no mess, no waste, nothing. It's just like, yeah, you've got your plates, you get your knife and fork, and you're good. How long has it been since you've been eating this way? Like when you were in hospital and you were kind of doing keto, how long ago was that?
So 9 years ago, I started on. I was in the hospital and started on the keto. And I haven't kept track. I've probably been primarily carnivore for 3 years now. And
And
even though I'm happy with it and I'm doing well and I physically have had just great changes, I'm still always tweaking and playing. I want to lose that last 20 pounds. So I do have some dairy products. Um, One of the things that I feel like I'm not 100% metabolically healthy because I still need blood pressure meds. and there's a chance I'll always need them. But there's also a chance, I have a little more stomach fat than I'd like to have. And so you kind of combine those two things, and I think I've got room to improve. So I'm always tweaking and playing with the diet. I was wearing a continuous glucose monitor. Oh, it was, first of the year. And one of the things someone had suggested was to cut back on the protein and add more fat, but it's kind of hard to do. So I decided to just do a little experimentation, and I put butter in my coffee, and then I would actually drink like beef broth in the evening with butter in it. So I was eating a stick to a stick and a half of butter, and it was amazing because my glucose would drop after I drank the butter. Yeah, I mean, it was like 20 points. So I was thought, okay, this seems to be the track. And the other thing that was interesting is I could do a 5-day fast and my ketones would start to come up, but they're still relatively low. I started the butter trick and my ketones were shot right up. So I thought, okay, this is cool. So I've been doing that. Then I put on another continuous glucose monitor. The results didn't mimic. The glucose stayed more steady. So I don't know what to make of it. We just experiment. But one of the things I was doing is when I'd have the butter in my coffee, I'd have some cream, and I like cheese. And see a lot of people talking about, sometimes if you're stalling on carnivore, you better look at the cheese. It may be the culprit or any other dairy. So just this week, I started eliminating all dairy. And so then the question is, do I keep the fat in the coffee? So I ordered in some beef tallow. I don't recommend beef tallow in coffee. I tried that this morning, and I had to kind of choke it down. So it was worth a try. I think I'll try the MCT oil for a while. Um, yeah, one of the interesting things, I had labs done, and it was kind of during this experiment. I've been sick right before the labs, so I don't know if that had an impact, but my A1C actually had gone up higher than it's ever gone. Um, and I can't get my HDL up. My HDL tends to hover in the 36 to 40, and I think it was 39. And I know a lot of people that have switched to carnivore or particularly added the fat, they tend to see a good bump in the HDL, and I have not been able to get that bump. So I've been kind of just experimenting and playing, but I don't at this point see any major dietary shifts outside of playing with the macros within carnivore and the further elimination of like the dairy. I love the butter, so that's been one it's not been as much fun to give up. But I'll try it for a few months and just see how it goes. And if that doesn't work, we may try something else.
It's a good position to be in where you can, because you've eliminated so much, you can test so easily because it's just like, okay, well, I'll drop the dairy for now and I'll see how things go. And it's very easy to see if that's going to, over time, if that's going to make a difference or not, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that I'm not a heavy drinker. I would call a social drinker. So that might be 2 to 3 glasses of wine, 2 to 3 nights a week. But the more and more I read and watch videos, the more people say that the alcohol will stay with you for a week or more. So I've really cut back, and I will tell you that I feel like my focus is way better. So now I pretty much only drink if we actually are at a social event. And so if I myself now go in 2, 3 weeks without a drink, and I find myself more focused, um, kind of been dropping a tiny bit of weight, but I've added the fat. I've quit drinking at the same time. So I suppose you could say I eliminated two things at once. So it's not quite as convenient, but I had a lot less things to worry about. To your point, it is way easier when you eat in such a limited window. And like we talked about earlier, some people think it's going to be boring, but I just don't find it the least bit boring. A steak is just always delicious.
Right.
Broccoli is never delicious.
So, when I hear people say, "Oh, it must be boring," I always feel like that's because you haven't experienced it, and until you actually experience it, you can't understand the perspective shift because it's like every meal is the best meal you've ever eaten, like, you're always looking forward to the next one.
Well, that is 100% the truth. I look forward to eating, but I also have so much time because I eat so infrequently. I mean, that is a benefit that's overlooked. Maybe if I was forcing myself to eat 3 times a day, maybe that would get boring. But I really have no desire to eat more than once or twice a day. And even when I eat twice a day, it's usually in a pretty narrow window. I might come home after work at 3:30, eat a little something, then go work out, and then eat a meal at 5:30 or 6 and eat a little bit bigger meal.
So, do you get funny looks from people if when they find out that, you're working through an entire day and you haven't eaten anything? It's like that must be weird for some people, no?
A lot of people will say I could never do that, and if you don't try it, you don't know what you can and can't do. And if you're eating a lot of carbohydrates and sugar, you almost can't do that. So yes, I do. I obviously the people I work with know me and they accept that I'm a little bit out there in some regards, and so they're very much used to it. I was in the middle of a 3-day fast. We looked at a project out of town, and everybody wanted to go to lunch. I went to a Mexican restaurant, and I sat there and had water. And I think people were pretty shocked that A, I was able to sit through that lunch, and B, it was on day 3, so I hadn't eaten for 3 days. But I also think sometimes they kind of respect you because they recognize, okay, this guy has willpower I don't have.
Yeah, I think that's a really big thing, that people realize, like, "Oh, wow, you can do this? This is amazing." But the thing is, when you're actually doing it, like, sometimes I feel like if you're fasting, it can be a little bit hard to kinda kickstart yourself into a fast, like, if it's extended. But, once you're on there, like, you don't have the same cravings that the average person would have, right?
I would tell you that the interesting thing is that hunger is a habit. Maybe that's not the best way to put it. It's timing more than anything else. Because when you quit eating, if you eat 3 meals a day, you quit eating breakfast, you're starving at breakfast when you quit eating breakfast. But eventually, you no longer miss breakfast. Now, I was not a big breakfast eater before, but then when I quit eating lunch, I was hungry at lunch. Eventually, I'm rarely hungry at lunch now. Now, when I do a multi day fast, I'm hungry at dinner, but it's habit because after I get past it, I go to bed. I didn't eat last night. And so I was hungry at dinner time. I went to bed. I woke up in the morning. I was fine. I wasn't hungry. Lunchtime came. I wasn't hungry. About 3 o'clock, I was starting to get a little hungry, but it wasn't bad. If I was doing a 2 or 3, 4 day fast, I could have probably continued pretty easily. One of the things I did experiment a little bit was fat fasting. So I might have a stick of butter through the day, and it keeps you satisfied. So if I had butter in my coffee in the morning, and then had butter in a beef broth or something at night, it was much easier to fast. But you're still getting in 800 calories. So is that really a fast? It's kind of hard to know, and it may be something I experiment with some more. I'm kind of waiting. I've got an appointment with my functional medicine doctor in a couple weeks. So I want to talk to him. I've got another continuous glucose monitor I may put on and kind of have some more fun and experiment a little bit.
Right. So, it's been, 9 years since the stroke. Do you have any lingering effects from that?
I'm extremely lucky in so many ways. So for the most part, no. Um, I do have tingling on the left side of my face. And I suppose a guy could find that annoying. One of the things I like to say is we all know we should eat better, we should exercise, but I know why I'm doing it, right? I've got this great reminder every day. I know exactly why I'm doing it. So to me, that it's a motivator. But beyond that, I really don't. I will tell you, if I'm extremely tired and it's cold outside, every once in a while, I'll catch my left leg drag just a touch. No one else would ever notice, just something I can tell. but outside of that, I'm 100%. I Again, I'm so fortunate because I think had I not had that stroke, I would have had it later, or it might have been a heart attack or something else, and the outcome would have been so much worse. I don't recommend a stroke, but if you're going to have one, you want to have it young. At 47, you can recover much easier. You know, they say once you've had a stroke, you're at a much greater risk for a second stroke. And that risk does diminish over time. But when I was in the rehab hospital and then I went back for outpatient, there was a lady that I was in there with, you know, on the inpatient side, and she came back. But she was older and fairly obese. And so it was going to be really hard for her. And not everyone, you know, one of the things that I hope people could take away is that you've got a choice to make when something like that happens. You know, life is going to happen, but you get to assign meaning to it. You get to decide what to do with it. I think if I had 1,000 people in a room and that had all survived a stroke, and I said, how many people would say a stroke's the worst thing that ever happened? I suspect a large number of people would say yes. You know, so the question becomes, how many people do I have to put in a room for somebody to say it's the best thing that ever happened to me? And the answer is one, right? Put me in the room, and I'll say, outside of maybe my wife and my kids, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. My life is unbelievably different today because of it. I probably would have just continued to put on 5 to 7 pounds a year, and it would have been, you know, I was borderline morbidly obese at the time. And
Yeah, and as you say, like that, and in following that direction, the stroke or the heart attack later in life would have been inevitable, right?
oh, absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, could have been, who knows what it would have been, but there would have been definitely a medical. I probably would have become diabetic. And I do, you know, I credit my recovery a lot to that attitude of just, listen, I'm going to make the most of it. It's the best thing that happened. And because here's the reality, right? And this is what I hope people can recognize. It happened, and I had that opportunity to be a victim and say it's the worst thing. And if I had decided to become a victim, said it was the worst thing, it would have been, right? I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. I wouldn't have lost the weight I've lost, built the muscle I've built. I'd be a very different person. You know, Henry Ford said, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And that's the truth. And I think when it comes to our health and our happiness, you just have to decide, right? How you're going to paint, what meaning you're going to assign to anything that happens to you. Life's going to
Mm.
happen. You got to assign meaning and make it a meaning that's going to serve you instead of serve you negatively.
Like, is it purely your motivation, the feeling after the stroke, all that kind of thing that's kept you going for this time? Are there other things, like there are other kind of health things you notice from time to time that you go, yeah, I've got to stay this way?
It's definitely mostly the stroke, but I take a lot of inspiration from other people in both a positive and negative way, if you know what I mean. You know, I look at a lot of people my age and they look way older. They're in terrible shape, and I don't want to join them. Right? To me, that's the motivator. I don't want to be like them. And then there's other people who are my age and older who are in amazing shape and better shape than me, and so you know, it just shows me what's possible, and that keeps me motivated for sure. But also probably number one is knowing where I'm going to go or where I could go because I've been there if I don't do what I need to do.
Yeah. Um, how has your wife, how have your kids reacted to the way you're eating?
So my wife is she's amazingly supportive. I really expected some pushback from her just because, you know, this is such a crazy way of eating, but I think she knows that I've spent the time. I've kind of tried lots of different things, and so I think she's just willing to accept that I'm going to do this. She has slowly added more protein. She's gotten into lifting weights, and so now she's starting to see the benefit of protein. So she still eats vegetables. She's always been a pretty clean eater and pretty trim. So I've had good support from her. My kids are they were about 13 at the time of the stroke. They're 22, so they're out of the house. My oldest is 34, and he was almost out of the house when this happened. I think he was out of the house when it happened. So he's not really seen me, but he's actually suffered with ulcerative colitis. And I think by the time I learned about this and some of the potential benefits, it was too late. And he was so bad with it that he actually had his colon removed and has an ileostomy bag now. I tried to get him on the carnivore and he did it some, but I think it was too late. There's another YouTuber, I can't think of his name, that's out there, and I was grateful for him because when my son first started talking about having that surgery, it was so scary and seemed like almost the end. And to see somebody else that had gone through it and was living life and was better ultimately for it was extremely helpful to me. Yeah, my other kids, they've known me so long, obviously, and like I said, I'm tend to be extreme when I jump into something. I jump in, so they're used to it. They're not surprised. I'm not above picking up a raw steak in front of them, and just biting a chunk off of it, just for a reaction. My
It's like
wife
a
doesn't
party trick.
appreciate that. I saw you had somebody on the other day talking about eating raw meat, and a lot of people seem to get freaked out. But my wife doesn't like it, but then we'll go somewhere and she'll be willing to get steak tartare, and it's like, well, this is raw. Why? What's the difference?
Yeah, I think it's a like it's a, I think I have this a little bit. It's like a mental thing. It's like if I prepare, I mean, how do you prepare raw raw meat? But if I prepare it myself, then I'm worried that I'm going to poison myself. But if it's in a restaurant, they've probably taken precautions or whatever. So, you know.
Well, I will say I don't eat like a lot of raw hamburger from the grocery store. This is from this is from a cow that we uh, kind of know the history of and was processed in a small facility where I think it's probably safer. But
Yeah,
we worry about it. But I mean, tons of people eat rare steaks, which are raw and cold in the middle. And the theory is that if you sear the outside, you're going to kill that bacteria. But I'm not so sure. I mean, they might have just trimmed it and cut it and could have easily cut some of that bacteria down to the side where it's not going to get that much cooking. So
yeah. And I mean, the truth is, you never know. You can get food poisoning from a bit of lettuce, you know.
you hear a lot more cases of salmonella from lettuce and other vegetables than you do from meat.
You see, more ways that plants are trying to kill us. Um, yeah. So, have you had anyone kind of look at what you're doing and go, "Okay, I'm gonna give it a try"?
I have. I would tell you the one interesting thing was so I started with a personal trainer, and I'm pretty blessed to have a really nice gym at home. And so he would come here, and eh, for a while I was wearing a sports coat to work every day. And one day, and it was really after I'd gone full carnivore had been full carnivore for a while, I wore a polo shirt like this. And the number of people that were just like complimenting, God, you work out, you're big, what they just couldn't believe it. I really wasn't much stronger. It was almost like I'd primed myself, I'd done all the workout, but I wasn't giving myself the nutrients. And all of a sudden, when I gave myself the nutrients, some size came on and people noticed. So a lot of people do ask, trying to get that, got that silly light hitting me just right. So a lot of people would ask, and I'd tell them, and they do get very interested. But it's also amazing that people seem interested, and they're like, "Wow, that's amazing!" And like, but I couldn't just eat meat. Like, yeah, you really could. And then people tell me they like vegetables. Now, I am I am convinced maybe there's a few people that naturally like vegetables. I think they're an acquired taste, right? I don't think that the vegetables we eat today existed 100,000 years ago. That's one of the things that I do. One, it's so confusing because you get the China study saying vegan's the best. You got Sean Baker saying carnivore. How do you decide? Who do you believe? You got the government saying one thing. And for what I do, Lave, I just ask myself, what did we do 100,000 years ago? Right? If you put a plate of broccoli in front of me and a steak, and I don't know that one is healthier for me, I'm going to eat the steak. Everybody's going to eat the steak, right? I used to drink scotch. The first time I drank scotch, it was like drinking lighter fluid. Now, eventually, I learned to like scotch, but it was an acquired taste. I think vegetables are the same. And most people, truthfully, they don't eat raw vegetables. They eat vegetables with all kinds of oils and salt and who knows what else on them. Raw vegetables, for the most part, are disgusting, right? We're not going to eat them, right? My dog won't eat them. My dog will eat a steak. My dog won't eat it. So anyway, I just tend to go back and say, what do we do 100,000 years ago, right? We would have eaten steak. If we couldn't find an animal and we were going to starve to death, sure, we'd eat twigs, bark, whatever it took. But if we had a choice, we were not going to eat a vegetable. And I do the same thing. There was for a long time there was this talk of nutrient timing. Well, you can't eat too much protein at any one time, or you're just going to waste it. Well, biologically, that made zero sense to me. Right? We had to go days without eating, right? And then if you don't eat, you're going to get weak. Okay, so let's think about it. So I'm in North Dakota. I got a blizzard for 3 days. I can't leave my shelter. The sun comes out. Now I've got to traipse through snow, but I'm weaker to go hunt. It makes no sense, right? We know human growth hormone goes up when you fast. Why? Right? Well, who knows? Maybe somebody knows. I think it's there solely to preserve muscle. And I've had great results from lifting weights in a fasted state. And the whole protein, I wonder sometimes if that protein timing, those studies that were saying there was some truth to that you could only absorb 30 grams or whatever, maybe those were based on protein powders, right? Because a powder is going to be absorbed much differently. I don't have anything, I don't take protein powders because if you eat strictly meat, you're going to get all the protein you need. And I do worry about our body really absorbing the nutrients differently and maybe not having the complete amino acids. So I think there definitely women sometimes struggle with getting enough protein. So it may make a lot of sense for them, but if you're eating pure carnivore, I doubt you need it.
Yeah. I kind of have a very similar mindset, and when people are saying, like, "You can't leave so much room between meals, you have to eat multiple small meals a day, you have to do this, you have to do that with your diet, and you have to do this," and it's like, it makes no sense because there is no way we could have eaten this way in the past.
Right. Yeah. I mean, did they think we went out to hunt for food and we saw the sun was straight up and we got our Fred Flintstone's lunchbox out and had a sandwich? Of course not. We ate when we found food, right? If they were hunting, they may have after they killed an animal, they may have eaten the organs. They may not have. There seems to be a lot of debate whether we need the organs. They threw them to the dogs. The hunters ate them. I don't know, but we ate when we had food. We ate a lot when we had food. We didn't get fat. That's one of the things I fight right now. I definitely believe the hormone model versus just calories in, calories out. But calories at some point, volume has to count, right? But we didn't used to get fat. I mean, animals in the wild don't get fat, right? They eat till they're satiated because they're eating the proper diet. And I definitely, I've got an employee that was diagnosed recently with fatty liver. And he came to me and he told me, and I said, well, you know what you can do for that. And he said, yeah, my doctor said eat carnivore. I was like, that's amazing. Very few doctors will do that. He went carnivore and he went strict carnivore and he's lost like 40 pounds in a few months. I mean, it's just been amazing for him. The weight just came off him. Now I'm not that guy. The weight doesn't just fall off me. So I have to try a little harder and I have lost some weight. Don't get me wrong, but it's not like him. It's just like, just melts off him and he eats till he's satisfied, right? He doesn't weigh anything. He doesn't count calories. He eats till he's full. And I think that's probably how we're designed. And I don't know, why that doesn't work for me as well. Am I just more certainly I had a stroke. I was metabolically unhealthy. Maybe I still think takes blood pressure medicine. I'm still not 100% metabolically healthy. What it takes to get me there, I don't know. Had one doctor that suggested like taking the Ozempic shot because apparently that can have some blood pressure regulation, but the side effects, I just never say never, but I'm nowhere near ready to go there yet. It'll be an option. I suppose it's on the table, but it scares me. And I believe that I probably got to where I was based on diet. And there's probably a way to get out of it based on diet. It's just some of us, it may take a little more tweaking and a little more nuance. And I'm just willing to keep playing with it and keep trying.
Yeah, and again, that's another thing that kind of when you look at the last 100,000 years, that seems to make sense as well, that you would be able to get out of it with diet because, pharmaceutical companies weren't around to give us the things back then, right?
No, they sure weren't. We've got interesting thing here in the States, because now there's at least talk of trying to outlaw the pharmaceutical commercials. It's an interesting model. You watch the news, which I try to avoid, but you watch the news, and basically the ads you're going to see in the news are pharmaceutical, food companies, and around here, accident attorneys. Well, forget the accident attorneys, but how could we ever expect the news to do a negative report on a pharmaceutical or a food when that's what feeds them, right? That's where their huge source of their incomes comes from. I mean, that we'd all do the same thing. I can't blame them. I'm not going to bite the hand that feeds me, but it's not a good model for the citizens here in the States. And I think we're one of the few developed countries that even allows that.
Yeah, I think the only other one is New Zealand, and I'm pretty sure if commercial advertising by pharma got outlawed in the States, I'm pretty sure New Zealand would follow suit pretty quick smart.
Yeah, I'm not going to hold my breath that it happens, but it's exciting that we're at least starting to have the conversation here.
Yeah, I think open discussion about anything is ultimately a good thing, right?
It is, and I say it. You think when you see those ads, it's because they want people to ask their doctors to if this drug is right for you. But I don't think it is. I think it's solely so that the TV revenue relies on them, so they can't do a negative story on them. And maybe
Yeah,
that's a cynical way to look at it, but I really think that's a huge component of it. I think it's just a bonus if somebody sees it on TV and asks their doctor and gets prescribed a drug.
yeah, I think you're right because no matter what the case is, the doctors have already been worded up that that drug is right for them, no matter what the problem is.
And I'm not 100% anti-pharmaceutical. As I mentioned, I'm on blood pressure meds to keep my blood pressure regulated, and I believe in having your blood pressure low. I think it's necessary, so I take that. I don't take a statin. So I was telling you, my labs were kind of interesting. Uh, my total cholesterol since I've been carnivore, and my LDL runs a little high, but not terribly high, enough that my GP would love to put me on a statin. So here I added all this fat. My LDL and total cholesterol are now in the normal ranges. And here, believe it or not, I'm disappointed because I actually think your LDL and total should be higher than what they recommend. So I actually see that as a negative. But yeah, it's just really interesting when you do something like that that on paper, in theory, is going to raise your total cholesterol, raise your LDL, and it actually went down.
That's interesting. And so, did your like going from being vegan and having a not so good diet in the past, your triglycerides, have they come down?
Oh, triglycerides have come way down. Yeah. So, when didn't keep good records back then, but when I went on that medically supervised weight loss, and that was on standard American diet, I think my triglycerides were in the 300s. And as a vegan, I got very low LDL, and my triglycerides were were pretty normalized. But that's only because I didn't eat processed foods. Um, I don't really know what they were when I kind of added the lean protein back in, because as I did that, that's kind of when I also let chicken sandwiches come in. I was also that guy that ate generally pretty healthy, but maybe if somebody brought donuts in or bagels, I might go have a half a bagel, and then I'd go finish the bagel, and then I'd go get another bagel, and then if nobody was looking, I'd get another one. Um, and let me tell you, that's the other thing about carnivore, or quite frankly, keto. When you just get the sugars and all the starches and anything that's going to convert to sugar, you lose the cravings. I used to say I could go to the store and not buy the M&Ms. If the bag of M&Ms was at home, I could not open it. If there was a bowl of M&Ms, the only reason not to carry it to the sofa was because I'd at least get exercise going back and forth to empty the bowl over multiple trips. But now I could literally have a bowl of M&Ms. Matter of fact, one day, um, after I think I'd probably gone, I don't even know if I was carnivore, but I was definitely keto, and I was seriously into fasting. I'd gone to some event, and they gave me this ginormous, like 30-inch or 40-inch pizza coupon. And so I gave it to my staff, and they ordered pizza. I'm in the middle of a multi-day fast. There's pizza in there. And it smelled good. I would have liked a piece, but it was no problem to not eat a piece. Now, had I had a
It
piece, I probably would have had 10. Um,
'Cause that's the problem. Once you reintroduce it, you it's hard to go back. It's like smoking or giving up drinking or something, you can abstain, but as soon as you start doing it again, it's like, "Yeah, okay, I'm full time now."
well, I would tell you back then that would have been the case. Every once in a while, my wife will want to go somewhere and have pizza. And when I say every once in a while, maybe 3 times a year, I can go have pizza one night and no ongoing craving, no desire. It's actually very easy for me. And I can even go, and the other difference is I might go and have 2 or 3 pieces, whereas before I could have had a whole pizza.
Yeah, it's, it's really nice to be in a position like that where it's almost like your emotional attachment to the stuff that you craved before and the stuff that you ate too much of before is just gone, right?
It's amazing. So we might go to a fundraiser where they've got a pre-plated meal, and I do try to be smart and maybe eat a steak before I go to something like that. So the pre-plated meal come, I won't eat the salad. I'll eat the protein. It might have a little sauce I don't really want, but I'll eat whatever the protein is. And then the dessert will be sitting there, and I just can completely ignore it. Or if my wife has a bite and she's like, "Oh, this is amazing," and shoves a spoon of it in my mouth, I can eat it and have no more. Before, I'd eaten my dessert, I'd have finished her dessert, and if no one was sitting next to me, I would have eaten that dessert, and that's just all gone. I have it's like people think I have this incredible willpower and self control, but it's really easy. And I can't really credit carnivore so much as just removing all of those sugars and anything that turns to sugar.
Yeah, and it's when you remove those things, your hormones kind of get into balance, and like, because I think that's what's really driving it is this hormonal responses to, like, oh yeah, I know how I'm gonna feel when I eat this sugary thing.
I used to say I had a sweet tooth, and I no longer say that because I really don't have a sweet tooth. Do sweets taste great? Of course they do. Would I love to just eat desserts without thinking about it? Of course, but but I don't crave them. I don't really miss them. It's very easy for me to just skip dessert at a meal. I go to that fundraiser. It used to be partially, well, gosh, I paid for that. I better eat it. Or any kind of a meal where it's kind of a predetermined, and I just don't eat it. Or if it looks delicious, I have a bite and I acknowledge, wow, that is delicious. I'd love to eat the rest of it, but I know, there again, it comes back to, I know why I eat this way, right? I think it's easier for me because of what I've been through than maybe someone who is struggling a little bit with weight or body composition, whatever it is, maybe even minor health, but nothing serious. It's harder for them because they can take care of it tomorrow. Well, I'll start next week, but I don't feel like I have that luxury anymore just because of what I went through.
Yeah. So, if someone was seeking your advice, how do I start with carnivore? How would you tell them to begin to maximize their chances of success?
You know, I was fortunate because I went keto first. A lot of people have a lot of digestive issues when they go straight into carnivore. So that would probably be my advice: is to slowly eliminate the carbohydrates. Do not do it overnight. Don't just start eating steak and hamburger. Just slowly, slowly eliminate them over a month or two. I don't know what that looks like in most people's cases, and maybe start play with the fasting a little bit. But there again, you probably don't want to try to start fasting and carnivore at the same time. Probably should kind of do it in steps. But that'd be the biggest piece of advice: is just take it slow. You know, we all get in a hurry, and I'm as impatient as anyone. But we have a long life in front of us, and that's of course one of the other lessons of that stroke was, 3 weeks in a rehab hospital felt like an eternity, and I thought I'd remember every second of it. It's a blip. I don't even remember. I mean, I remember I was there, but I don't remember the day to day. It was just a blip. It was just a minor thing. So if it takes you 2 or 3 months to switch over to carnivore, so what? You'll get there. It's better than making yourself sick and not feel well. I would tell you that. Even if you get into fasting, take it slow. Pay attention to when people tell you refeeding. I don't remember if it was a 3 day or a 5 day fast. I ate too fast on the refeed and I was on the floor. I thought I was dying. I mean, I was miserable. My stomach was in knots. So just take it slow, and and the other thing is, watch the people that have had success and trust the process. It takes a while, but you will see. I think you'll see the improvements. And maybe you'll be fortunate like my employee and drop 30, 40 pounds in the first couple 3 months. I mean, his transformation's amazing. Like, fatty liver's gone.
For most people, the motivation will come from that appearance, but it's all the underlying things like the fatty liver and stuff that's really important, right?
Absolutely. And maybe if you're going to start, have some labs done and kind of play with it, and watch those results too, because they matter. Um, and even in my case, where I've saw some labs slip kind of the wrong way, I'm not changing anything yet because of that, but we'll run some labs again. I've got another set in 3 or 4 months, and so we'll kind of keep watching them, and you may have to tweak things.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good advice. So, Jim, how can people reach out to you? Do you have any social media or any way of getting in contact?
Probably the best way is just to email me. If there's, I'd be happy to talk to anyone. You could reach me at jimfolston.com, jim@jimfolston.com. Um,
Awesome. I'll pop your email address in the show notes. Um, Thank you for coming on and sharing your story and your experience, Jim. I really appreciate your time.
no, happy to be on. Thanks for having me, Dave.